So Mike Bloomfield was a bluesman, and I do not say that lightly. Mike was born in Chicago on July 28th, 1943. His parents were rich as shit, Jewish family. His dad invented the salt shaker or some crazy shit. By age 12, him and his family moved to the northern suburb Glencoe. Now Glencoe is a rich suburb. Mike comes from money and privilege, but that did not stop him from understanding and utilizing the essence of what is known as the blues or blues music. But this goes beyond the major third or the minor third. The microtones in between the minor and major third are the blue notes. The microtones in between the fourth and the fifth are the blue notes. The blue form, from the 1 to the 4 back to the 1 to the 5. This is Mike got all that, obviously, but Mike had the secret ingredient, which I will get to, about the knowing, intrinsically knowing the spirit of the blues, the essence of the blues. And all popular music today is derived from the blues. I'm gonna say it. Argue with me in the comments. The blues is a Black American genre of music that was formed in the Deep South in the late 1800s, mid to late 1800s. But by the 1910s, 1920s, recordings were being made of these artists like Son House, Robert Johnson, Charlie Patton, Blind Lemon Jefferson, the Lead Belly. It was the genre as a whole was influenced by spirituals and field hollers that they would sing as slaves, and the songs spoke truth to power and oppression. The Mississippi Delta, also known as the Fertile Crescent, that stretched from the northern tip of Mississippi to Vicksburg or Natchez near the southern tip, is the hotbed. It was the hotbed of blues music in the early 1900s, 1920s, 1930s. I've been to the Mississippi Delta. I've been to Clarksdale, which is Highway 61 runs right through it. They have the big crossroads thing there. There's different accounts on where Robert Johnson's supposed crossroads were. Some people say on Rosedale. Some people say on 61 or 51 or something. There's different accounts of that. But yeah, it was the hotbed of blues music in the early 1900s, but it was also a hotbed of racial discrimination. So basically, the Great Migration happened, which, to really simplify it, the Black Americans moved from the Deep South to up northeast, just north to Chicago, the Midwest, or west to Colorado, California, stuff like that. And then blues music, electric blues music started popping up in these cities, especially Chicago and the West Coast. One of the people that moved north was Muddy Waters, who came from the Delta to the south side of Chicago, which became the hotbed of blues in the 1940s, 50s, and early 60s. They started plugging in the amps, holding up mics to the harmonicas, adding drums, bass arrangements, rhythm sections. You gotta understand, the blues and the struggle to survive in the Jim Crow South are, intrinsically linked. Put a pin in that. Blues influenced jazz, which influenced R&B and soul, which influenced funk, which influenced hip-hop and modern R&B, which in turn influenced modern pop, basically. The Neptunes were, the sound of, the 2000s pop music, basically. You know what I'm saying? I forget early blues and R&B influencing creating rock and roll, which was literally a term to market white men who played blues and acted dumb, they didn't know they were endlessly ripping off Chuck Berry. You know what I mean? So back to Mike. He played in a few bands in the high school he went to in his northern suburb in the late 50s, but by the early 60s he was taking frequent trips to the south side of Chicago and actually sat in with a lot of blues musicians, eventually sitting in with Howlin' Wolf and Muddy Waters and their bands. And he could stand his ground. Like he from his account, he developed as a guitar player so much from doing that. Like that was what he did, and Muddy Waters spoke highly of him. You know what I'm saying? These people spoke highly of Bloomfield, and this was kind of like unheard of at the time, for like a white Jewish guy to be, you know, kind of operating in these spaces, south side of Chicago. And here we get to like the secret ingredient, the main reason why Mike he could play the blues like no other white man could, really. And that reason is that he was outside. Like he was with Muddy, he was with Howlin' Wolf, he was with Big Joe Williamson. You know, there's like in his journals he talks of like late nights at Southside Chicago blues clubs with older like blues musicians kind of taking him under their wing. Mike, in a way, he talked about how he related to the Black American struggle, like how they struggle. He somehow related it to his personal Jewish American struggle. Like, I really don't know how that worked, but like when you heard him play, you knew like something was special with Mike. He had a lot of influences. Steve Cropper, especially for the rhythm playing. Scotty Moore, you know, he played with Elvis. Otis Rush, Albert and Freddie King, Ray Charles, jazz guitarist Joe Pass, and Little Richard. And he loved B.B. King too, especially B.B. King. Basically, he was like well versed in Black American music. His form, like his phrasing, it was more kind of offset, like kind of offbeat, and like free form than other like white blues guitar players, I guess, like Keith Richards or Clapton, like who were very like on beat and emphasize like shorter melodic statements, pretty precise, you know. You don't really get to like, I feel like another white blues musician who was in the same class as Bloomfield until like Peter Green of early Fleetwood Mac. He was great. He was really good. Like more like less is more than Bloomfield in a way. Like Bloomfield played a lot, to be honest, but it was all just so good. Like, he also differed from most like white blues players who like preferred like very overdriven or fuzzed out guitar tones. A lot of the time from Marshall Stacks. Mike played like a clean, just like ever so slightly overdriven tone from like a 65 Fender Twin Reverb tube amp. It gave him like a thinner tone, especially when he played the Telecaster in his early days with the single coils before he switched to the 59 Gibson Les Paul in the late 60s. His playing style influenced a lot of people. Hendrix talked about him, Carlos Santana, Jerry Garcia, legends. You know, you could hear that R&B style of rhythm playing is influenced by Steve Cropper, played on a lot of like the greatest R&B records of all time. Mike had a great like sense of dynamics in his picking hand. He played like a few sweet, soft blues licks, then just at the right moment, he just really digs in with his pick. You know what I mean? Like similar like B.B. King type shit. Mike really likes B.B. King. Their phrasing styles are very similar. They would mix like the sweet relative major pentatonic with the blues scale, which is basically the minor pentatonic with a few added chromatic notes. Like we could get into all the nitty gritty of like the blues and how like the blues operates in a different like tonal context than most European derived American music. It's actually more modal than tonal. It gets back to like the rhythmically complex music of the African diaspora rather than the like tonally complex European music. Not saying that like they can't be this like European music can't be rhythmically complex or African music can't be tonally complex, but that's just like a generalization, you know what I mean? We could get into how like other genres like jazz, R&B, and rock and roll like took the blues form and ran with it. Yeah, but I want to emphasize that Mike just really, he knew the spirit of the blues. Mike firsthand was with those blues artists on the South Side, and I mean, it's not like you got to give. He I wouldn't say he's like a better blues musician than Muddy Waters or Howlin' Wolf. That's like about as legendary as you get, until you go back to like Robert Johnson and Sunhouse. So I mean, yeah, I'd put him like in the tier like probably with like Otis Rush, Magic Sam. I say he was pretty much at that level. You know what I mean? Mike could play. He could play his ass off. You know what I mean? Like Muddy Waters was more of a less is more type guy. Same with Hewart Sumlin of Howlin' Wolf, but you could tell he was definitely influenced by both of them. Yeah, so he was playing with these legends at like age 17, 18. Bob Dylan said he was the greatest guitarist he had ever heard. And yeah, Mike was like a very, very introverted at times. He struggled with like insomnia and depression, which led to self-medicating with heroin, alcohol, and other drugs. And you know how that goes. That leads to the vicious cycle of depression to drug addiction to depression to drug addiction that he experienced like near the last like 10 years or so of his life. Yeah, him similar to many rock legends like Kurt Cobain. He did not like being in the spotlight really, from most accounts. Yeah, by 1970, Mike had basically like quit playing due to his struggles, except for like the rare collab project or live appearance, which were also very spotty. He spent time in a mental hospital to get off some drugs in 1979, but you know how it goes, like old habits die hard. You know, by the late 70s, Mike had he'd become homebound basically, requiring people to drive him places and basically take care of the guy. And this time he was receiving a $50,000 trust fund each year from his grandparent. So this all goes February 15th, 1981. A man was found slumped in a car in San Francisco. The body was registered as a John Doe. The cause of his death was a supposed overdose on coke and meth, which is way rarer than overdosing on heroin. I'm 99% sure. Mike also like preferred heroin and downers to uppers like coke and meth, so I'm just thinking he could have had no tolerance to it and like just overdone it. We'll never really know. But yeah, Mike was one of them, you know, that lived by the sword and died by the sword. He had lots of struggles, but through all that, he was just so influential, just such a pure blues musician. Yeah, you know, from the words of author Ed Ford, all we know is that Michael Bloomfield found sleep for the last time, and perhaps, as he left this earth, heard the hellhounds baying receding into the darkness. Referencing the absolutely haunting Robert Johnson blues song, Hellhound on My Trail, and his insomnia. The messed up thing is with uppers, though, you don't just like fall asleep and die peacefully like heroin, I'm pretty sure. I don't really know. You probably had like a heart attack or some shit. That's crazy. R.I.P. Mike Bloomfield, you know. Let's get into his career, his discography, you know. Remember the great things about Bloomfield, his collaborations with other great artists. Yeah, let's get into the nitty gritty. One thing I forgot is that Mike was like naturally left-handed, but he forced himself to like learn how to play guitar right-handed, like how most people play. Which is not what most left-handed guitarists do. They usually like flip the guitar around, I think, or get a special-made guitar. I really don't know. And Mike's bag was also deeper than just like Chicago blues. He also like could play like the acoustic Southern blues styles. You know, he could finger pick. He could do a lot, and he really showed that in like the mid-60s. But in the early 60s, Bloomfield started playing shows around Chicago. He met other blues artists such as nine-string guitarist Big Joe Williams and future bandmates harmonica master Paul Butterfield, guitarist Elvin Bishop, and blues singer Nick Gravenites. In 1964, the legendary John Hammond Sr. signed Mike to Columbia Records, which resulted in a few solo sessions that were released posthumously. And then in early '65, the Paul Butterfield Blues Band was formed. In addition to Mike on guitar, they had a second guitarist, Elvin Bishop, and Mark Naftalin on keys, plus Howlin' Wolf's ex-rhythm section, basically, bassist Jerome Arnold and drummer Sam Lay, legends in their own right. The face of the group was Paul Butterfield, harmonica virtuoso, basically, and lead singer, who spent his own time sitting in with Southside blues legends in the late 50s, such as Muddy Waters as well. Mike described Paul Butterfield as like quiet and like a dangerous man, I guess. Supposedly he kept that iron on him. You understand me? So Paul and Mike were probably the whitest guys to ever be bluesmen. That sounds cringe kind of, but they, like, if you know, you know. Paul and Mike were the real deal, you know. Like Elektra Records, the producer Paul Rothschild, legend in his own right, he saw one of the band's performances and produced their first self-titled album in September 1965, and it was released in October. Yeah, that self-titled album is just pure, like, Chicago blues. And when people talk about, like, this album, this album is more, like, derivative than what East-West would be. But it's got a lot of covers. Yeah, so, like, I'm sorry, I lost my spot, and now I found it. Yeah, so it mostly consisted of covers by blues artists such as legendary songwriter, bassist of Chicago, wrote a lot of records for like Muddy Waters, you know, a lot of chess records artists, Willie Dixon, Chicago harmonica legend Little Walter, Little Junior Parker, Muddy Waters, and Elmore James. But there were 4 originals: the Butterfield Elvin Bishop collab, Our Love Is Drifting, the Bloomfield written Screamin', great guitar on that one, the Bloomfield and Butterfield Naftalin collab, Thank You, Mr. Puva, and most notably the Nick Gravenitis composition Born in Chicago, which has become a bit of a blues standard over time. The lyrics are low-key hauntingly relevant still. Let's read the Born in Chicago lyrics. Born in Chicago lyrics. I was born in Chicago, 1941. I was born in Chicago, 1941. Well, my father told me, son, you had better get a gun. Well, my first friend went down when I was 17 years old. Well, my first friend went down when I was 17 years old. Well, there's one thing I can say about that boy. He gotta go. Well, my second friend went down when I was 21 years of age. Well, my second friend went down when I was 21 years of age. Well, there's one thing I can say about that boy. He gotta pray. Well, now, rules are alright if there's someone left to play the game. Well, now, rules are alright if there's someone left to play the game. All my friends are going. Everything's just don't seem the same. That's blues right there, for sure. For sure. So that they got a little motion from that album, you know, played a couple shows, and got the attention of Bob Dylan. So in June 1965, Bob Dylan, the biggest like rock star at the time, basically. I mean, he had Bloomfield play on most of the songs on his, what I'd say is greatest album of all time, is one of the greatest albums of all time, any genre, Highway 61 Revisited. Which pays reference to the legendary North-South Highway 61, goes through the Mississippi Delta, all that. Mike plays, it was a big part of the Great Migration, you know. Mike plays like country twang styles, R&B rhythm guitar like Steve Cropper, jangly chords, slide guitar on stabbing electric blues. Like on Tombstone Blues, that like stabbing guitar sound that was wild to hear in my early teens. Even wilder though was Dylan's and the Butterfield Blues Band's, minus Paul himself, plus keyboardist Al Cooper and Barry Goldberg's performance at the 1965 Newport Folk Festival. This was Dylan's first time like going electric live. It was kind of like a big deal, I guess. Like there's a lot of accounts of the events. When people talk about this, that one of like the main factors of Dylan's like electric sound was Mike Bloomfield's stabbing Telecaster blues licks on Maggie's Farm. Listen to that performance, Maggie's Farm at Newport Folk Festival 1965. It's very intense electric blues at a folk festival. So you know how that supposedly the sound was very bad. You couldn't really hear Dylan over Mike's guitar. Mike was just going. His guitar was very loud. So like it was like nervous energy. So yeah, that performance is the stuff of legend. Bloomfield chose not to tour with Dylan for the album, though, instead choosing to keep writing with the Butterfield Blues Band. This decision is just more proof that Bloomfield was a bluesman at heart, not content with playing more mainstream rap music. With the premier rock star of the early 60s, mid-60s. So Sam Lay, the drummer, the ex-Howlin' Wolf drummer, he was dealing with like an illness in late 1965, so the band got drummer Billy Davenport, who had a more jazzy style a little bit, also born in Chicago. After some live dates in Cali in early 66, they got to recording their second studio album and magnum opus, in my opinion, East West. Recorded at legendary 2120 South Michigan Avenue, Chicago, Chest Records Studios. Yeah, dude, this album is great. The band had been becoming like more democratic, with Paul Butterfield falling back a bit, giving space for more free-form improvisation, and definitely a free-form album it was in a way, at least a good part of it. Like the first self-titled album of theirs, East West included covers of classic blues songs by Muddy Waters, Robert Johnson, and more. But I want to focus on the two free-form jazz-influenced jams of the album. The first being the bop standard Work Song, written by Nat Adderley and Oscar Brown Jr., which it featured Bloomfield's and Bishop's lead guitar lines intertwining with Butterfield's like electric harmonica playing. Butterfield might be one of the best blues harmonica players. His performance on this is something else. Sounds like a railroad train. Little Walter's style was definitely like more original, but Butterfield was like a virtuoso on the harmonica in a way. Like he could play his ass off. The band's magnum opus, the title track East West, it was partly inspired by an all-night LSD trip that Bloomfield went on, listening to Ravi Shankar's droning Indian raga music and John Coltrane's modal jazz, of my favorite things. And yeah, people listen to Coltrane for the first time ever and they get like hypnotized, they lose their mind. Like same thing happened to Rakim, the rapper, like prepaid in full. He developed the concept of like flow for rap music, basically. Like that was like year one AD for like rap music, basically modern rap music. He developed the flow by like rapping in like melodies that Coltrane would play on sax, if you get what I mean. Like he kind of used his voice in rap music like Coltrane used the sax when he played jazz, modal jazz. And yeah, you can't talk about East West without mentioning the legendary extended jams of the song live performances at the Fillmore West in San Francisco, performing alongside Jefferson Airplane and greatly influencing the whole 67 San Francisco Summer of Love jam band psychedelia scene, with bands like the Grateful Dead being very, very influenced by Bloomfield's playing. Jerry Garcia, like that clean, freeform soloing style, like he said he was very influenced by Bloomfield. But yeah, Bloomfield like based the concept around his playing on like East West and worked song on the freeform jams based on modal jazz, a term that like kind of entered the mainstream in 1959 or maybe a little bit before with Milestones by Miles Davis, but for sure by 1959 when Miles Davis released his Kind of Blue album, one of the greatest jazz albums of all time, might be the greatest in my opinion, alongside with like The Shape of Jazz to Come and A Love Supreme. Yeah, the concept of modal jazz was influenced by the teachings of like composer and pianist George Russell. So let's get into it. Like tonal music always emphasized vertically stacked notes, aka chords. Many of them, like sometimes harmony building tension, then resolving. Like if you looked at it on a paper, it would be vertically stacked notes. In comparison, the new modal music of jazz musicians in the late 50s and 60s emphasizes exploring more a melody. One note usually goes horizontally in terms of notes on a page of sheet music. This was done over like one or two chords a lot of the time. A lot of the time just like vamps. And yeah, this goes back to when I mentioned that blues music operates differently and has its own set of rules in comparison to the tonal music that is derived from European music that emphasizes harmony rather than melody. But yeah, listen to the studio version and some live versions of East West for sure. The freeform modal jazz done by a guitar-based, like rather than a horn-based band, like jazz band, was totally kind of unheard of at the time, and it influenced jam bands for decades to come. There were so many cool like scales and modes that Bloomfield got into when he played East West, combining these basically like exotic scales and modes with like the blues scale and the major pentatonic scale. You know, he really had his own style. In the late 60s, Bloomfield became a bit of a session player, like offering guitar parts for Janis Joplin, Chuck Berry, Muddy Waters, Moby Grape, and Peter, Paul, and Mary. So, yeah, I like also pause this video and go listen to Janis Joplin's One Good Man with Mike on the lead guitar and tell me that's not the blues with a straight face. Tell me that's not the blues. And you can't. In the early 70s, Bloomfield formed his own band, the Electric Flag, with keyboardist Barry Goldfield, and then legendary R&B drummer Buddy Miles, and friend and vocalist Nick Gravenites, and session bassist Harvey Brooks, who also played with Bob Dylan. But the band did not last very long. Bloomfield's drug use was really catching up with him at the time, and after recording 2 projects, a soundtrack, and their studio album, A Long Time Comin', Electric Flag disbanded. But Al Cooper, the keyboardist behind the legendary keys of Dylan's Highway 61 Revisited, called up Mike in 1968, and they made a few live collab albums after they did this kind of studio album called Super Session, with Barry Goldberg returning on the keys as well, Harvey Brooks returning on bass, and adding session musician Eddie O on drums. Fast Eddie O. Mike infamously was dealing with bad insomnia at this time and did not come to the second day of recording out of the 2 days that Cooper booked. And Cooper had to call Stephen Stills real quick. And then Stephen Stills did the last 4 tracks. But I really love the Bloomfield side of this album, especially the first 5 tracks. It remains some of Bloomfield's best work. Especially the first track, Albert's Shuffle, dedicated to legendary blues guitarist Albert King. You know, one of the legends, one of the 3 kings. It's an almost 7-minute masterclass on blues guitar playing. Yeah, he's probably one of his best songs, along with East West and the opening medley to Live in 1978 at San Francisco. Stop is another really good one. Really is great blues guitar playing. And his Holy Modal Majesty is more like modal jazz inspired playing combined with blues playing, dedicated to the late great John Coltrane, who had recently passed. So yeah, Mike basically like gave up playing in 1970 due to his heroin addiction. But he continued to release a few solo, live, and collaboration projects with John Cale, John Hammond Jr., and Dr. John. You know, three Johns. But yeah, it's from this time I'd recommend the posthumously released Live at the Old Waldorf, 1978, in San Francisco. That's what I was trying to think of. Yeah, the opening medley of Sweet Little Angel and Jelly Jelly is one of his best performances ever, for sure. Just sweet blues playing. And yeah, he passed in '81. But Bloomfield is one of those. He's one of them for blues playing. Like, he is specifically a blues man. He's not like a band leader. He is not really like the songwriter type of guy. He is a blues guitar player, like almost like a hired gun type of figure. Like, he became like he dipped into that session musician lane. You know, he performed with a lot of different groups. He was not very much a singer. He was a bluesman, a blues guitarist, a blues musician, and yeah, he would. It's a very, very interesting life, career. Came from a lot of money, rebelled in a way, hanging out on the south side of Chicago. It's like he really was. Yeah, he really started that jam band thing, like, or the Butterfield Blues Band as a whole, basically. But Bloomfield coming in with that modal jazz influence, you know, free form playing. Yeah, he was really influential, and yeah, he was a pure blues guitarist, and we gotta have like we gotta have room for those, you know. Not everybody's gotta be a songwriter. Not everybody's got to be a front man, you know. He said he doesn't feel right like without his guitar. You know, he's just one of them that are like linked with the guitar, like intrinsically, just such a good player. And yeah, I'll leave it at that. R.I.P. Mike Bloomfield.